Just south of downtown Olathe, two houses sit back to back. They were built by two brothers. Those brothers, at the turn of the 20th century, helped transform Olathe from a frontier town with muddy streets to a town of prominence. Their names were Frank and George Hodges. Frank and George were born in Wisconsin in the 1860s to William and Lydia Hodges. The young boys were ambitious and full of life. Commenting on George's liveliness, their mother Lydia said, "He was a bundle of energy and ambition. He was always the first one of the family up in the morning, and he was on the go until bedtime." In 1869, the boys' father William loaded them, their mother Lydia, and newborn sister Minnie on a covered wagon and headed west.
They decided to make the trip west when Frank and George and Minnie's mother's father was going to lead a wagon train. So they went from Wisconsin down to Mason City, Iowa, where they joined the wagon train and started their trek westward.
The day they arrived in town was the day that there was a total eclipse of the sun in Olathe. And the story goes, Frank Hodges told the story when he was alive, that things were so dark during the midday that the chickens all went to roost.
Darkness would remain for the Hodges family. After making the difficult journey west and creating a new life in Olathe for his family, William Hodges became ill and died. The untimely death of their father left Frank and George with much responsibility, supporting their mother and little sister Minnie. But through this tragedy, the two brothers would reveal the qualities they held their entire life of character, resolve, and service to others. At the age of 20, George borrowed $2,500 to buy a small lumber company. With no money for a horse and wagon, he delivered heavy lumber on foot. In the first 3 weeks of business, George made a total of 25 cents. However, he did not give up, and soon the company began to thrive. George needed help, so Frank quit his teaching job and joined George in the business. In 1891, the Hodges Brothers Lumber Company was born in Olathe, Kansas. The company flourished into a multi-million-dollar business, and by 1933, they owned 14 lumber yards in eastern Kansas.
They were good businessmen, the kind that, if you shake your hand, they stand by what they say. They always were that way.
The Hodges brothers' first lumber yard was located on the corner of Kansas and Elm Streets in Olathe. It stood until 1987, when it was torn down for its bricks. With their success, Frank and George expanded their business ventures and bought the First National Bank of Olathe. Being Democrats, they also founded the Johnson County Democrat newspaper in Olathe. This paper would be the political rival of the Republican Olathe Mirror. The brothers were always interested in politics and public service. George was elected to the Olathe City Council at the young age of 21. However, death would again strike the Hodges family, and the brothers would use their interest in politics to make good from tragedy. Their beloved sister Minnie contracted typhoid fever and died. Because Olathe lacked proper water and sewage infrastructure, disease outbreaks were common. Through their grief, the brothers decided Frank should run for mayor to create needed infrastructure for Olathe. Running on a health platform, Frank was elected mayor in 1900. During his term as mayor, Olathe built its first sewage system, built a waterworks plant, and paved many of the muddy city streets.
Frank became a mayor of Olathe and took Olathe out of the mud, they always said, because he started the program of paving the streets, and he also was instrumental in starting the first sewage system in Olathe.
Minnie was gone, but Frank's term as mayor of Olathe ensured that other families would not face the same loss. George, being a talented public speaker, often spoke across the state of Kansas on the Chautauqua circuit. This, with his reputation as a successful businessman, gained him notoriety enough to run and be elected to the Kansas State Senate. As senator, Hodges was instrumental in passing legislation giving women the right to vote. In 1913, George made a successful bid to become the second Democratic governor of Kansas. His progressiveness followed as the women's suffrage amendment was added to the state constitution during his term, and Governor Hodges placed many women in key positions of the state government. He was also nationally known as a proponent of prohibition. Being strong Democrats in a predominantly Republican state, Frank and George were politically connected on the national level to the likes of Franklin Delano Roosevelt and later Harry Truman. In the 1930s, when the nation was in the depths of the Great Depression, FDR appointed Frank to serve as director of the Reconstruction Finance Corporation.
My grandfather Frank was well known as a very good businessman and banker, and he was asked by Washington, D.C. to head the RFC, Reconstruction Finance, out here in the Midwest.
The RFC oversaw federal monies loaned to banks and businesses. After extensive careers in business and politics, and having left an indelible mark on Olathe, George died in 1947. Frank went on to the ripe old age of 92 when he died in 1961. From poor boys riding a covered wagon to wealthy businessmen and influential politicians, the Hodges brothers helped take Olathe and others on the journey to success.
I think when you go back and look at Olathe history, there were probably no two brothers who had such an impact upon the town of Olathe.
They cared for everybody in Olathe. You'd be surprised how, for men who were successful and very, very busy, how much they really cared for their fellow man, and in particular people from Olathe and surrounding territory, the farms or the small towns.
From their involvement as Olathe businessmen to their political and civic endeavors to develop and advance the city, these two brothers undoubtedly left their mark on Olathe.